Hi, welcome back to the CCW Safe podcast. I'm Mike Darter. I'm the co-founder and CEO, and today I'm going to talk to Kent Brown, who's been our president for 2 years now, right?
A little over 2 years.
A little over 2 years.
Yeah.
So Kent Brown came on, like I said, a little over 2 years ago. He's done a great job, perfect fit, and we knew immediately when we met Kent in person that he was the guy. And so we want to do a little bit of introduction, kind of go over his history and his first 2 years with CCW Safe. So I'm just going to let you take it. Why don't you kind of just go over your history, kind of briefly what you did before,
Sure,
and go from there.
Yeah, I came to CCW Safe November of 21. I had at that point about 30 years of business experience working through a lot of consumer products companies, a lot of big Fortune 500 companies, managing sales teams, sales and marketing teams, and then moving back to some smaller businesses and running those, everything from, manufacturing and sourcing to e-commerce, operations. So it was a pretty broad business background. But when the CCW Safe opportunity came up, my wife and I are gun owners, big believers in the Second Amendment, right to self-defense. And it was a really interesting opportunity to be able to merge all that experience with something that we really believed in. A lot of people talk about mission-driven companies, this is one where we really do have a mission to help people. We exist to help people. We don't make a coffee maker or something like that when people are like, yeah, it's a mission-driven company. We want to make sure everybody has great coffee every day. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that, but we're really here to help people when they need it. And so it was a great fit for me too. People always ask, with people like yourself and Stan and Kyle and Don, all the legal and law enforcement expertise we have, Gary and Chris, how do I fit in? Because my background is not legal and law enforcement. So what I really tell them is that there's really two things I do. One is, of course, operate the day-to-day business, and assist where we all work on strategy together. But the second big thing is just make sure that we're enforcing the company's mission and values so that we can fulfill our obligations to the members, right? That we have all the resources we need, that they're the best resources available, and that we deploy them against the members in a way that exceeds their expectations. And that's really what I do, right? I'm not here for legal opinions or I haven't worked a homicide case like all of you guys, but I'll make sure that the members get taken care of and that everything is ready for them and that we deploy immediately in full force when they're in trouble.
Well, like you said, that is our mission. And we don't manufacture, we don't sell, we don't ship anything.
Yeah.
So we really have to, in fact, Justin and I were talking over lunch how, that's what we do. We have to stand behind, what we're selling because it's not something you can feel, hold, touch, but it's something that has to be done. And so that's a huge importance to have somebody like you be able to come in and be able to do that. When you first came in, just kind of talk to our members about, what you thought the processes were, kind of when you came in. What were your first thoughts upon coming to CCW Safe?
There were a lot of things we were doing really well, right? One of the challenges in the business was it was growing really rapidly. And so, we had to work a little bit on our ability to scale up and make sure we had enough people to answer, the phones in the member services department and make sure all of our other business processes were in place to support the growing membership base, which it did. The one thing from a process standpoint that absolutely did not need to change was the critical response process, mm-hmm. right? Which is really when we deliver the service to the members when they get in trouble or they've been forced to defend themselves. And so that process, we haven't really changed very much. What the member sees, we haven't changed. We've changed some behind the scenes on how we document it and how we, do some things mm-hmm. and tracking. But the member still receives boots on the ground when they've been in a deadly force shooting, right? They still receive all the financial benefits. They still have Don picking and vetting their attorney. All that was working great. So we haven't changed that very much at all. And it doesn't need to be changed. It's the best in the industry. Nobody does what we do. And so that was really the one thing I didn't have to touch. I had to learn that, but I didn't have to change it.
I do think the process has been refined, though, since you got here, of how, and we might have you talk to that a little bit, of when somebody calls, kind of the behind the scenes things, because people, they call in, they're immediately connected with an attorney. Services are immediately started, but they might not kind of know the behind the scenes, which there is a lot behind the scenes. So,
yeah, it is an interesting process. So we have our 800 hotline. You call that number. It's answered 24 hours a day. There is an operator who answers, and she asks 5 questions, right? Just quick screening questions so we can make sure that the person's a member, make sure that this is an emergency situation. Sometimes we get calls on there that aren't emergencies. Not often, but we do. So that process generally takes about a minute, depending upon how they answer the questions. And then that call is immediately patched through to either Don or Jennifer, right, our on-staff attorneys. And this can happen 24 hours a day. When the call comes in, the moment it gets transferred, we notify everybody on the critical response team, and myself and a couple of the business people, we get notified. We don't have any idea what the call is yet, right? So we're just on alert while they're talking to Don or Jennifer. And I think there's 8 or 9 of us that get alerted immediately. And so what happens is the boots on the ground folks start checking in, and they're standing by, ready to go if the result of the call means that we need to deploy them on site somewhere. And so sometimes we know in 5 minutes, and if the call lasts a little longer with Don, it might be 30 minutes. But 24 hours a day, we're all waiting for the update from the attorneys on what we do. And then if it is a situation where we have to have boots on the ground, we already have critical response team is already looking at flights. And so there's a group communication going on, and they're saying, hey, I can be on this flight, landing at this time, so I should be on site at this time. And they're just waiting for the go-ahead from me to deploy the resources. And so once we get the assessment from Don, and then a couple of us weigh in, and we deploy the resources and get them going. We had an incident just a few months ago that was in Illinois, and we sent 2 folks on that one. We put 2 people on the ground. Chris and Gary both went. Yeah, they were there within 24 hours of the call. It was in a pretty small town, but we had that on-site immediate response. We deployed not just people, we deployed money immediately. That member had to be bailed out. It was kind of a unique bail situation in Illinois. For people who are watching from Illinois, they might know that the bail laws have all changed in the last couple of months, and I think we were about 2 weeks ahead of that change, or maybe a week, but we had to act super fast or we were going to be subject to these new bail laws, which probably would have left our member in jail. So we had to deploy that money quickly. We actually got that done the next day as well, and that was a big check, and we wrote that.
Yeah, that was on $1 million bond, correct?
$1 million bond. So
$100,000.
Yeah, so we delivered $100,000 to the clerk right at the close of business the next day. The member was bailed out. We had already retained a local attorney and paid that. We knew we were in for what's probably going to be a longer case there. He does have some difficult charges. So we probably in the first 36 hours deployed 2 people and close to $150,000 on his behalf immediately. And I still remember the first night that the team was there, we had a recap call at about 7 or 8 o'clock. It was on a Friday night. And I did it at my dining room table, and my wife kept walking by in the background, and when the call was over, she was like, oh my gosh, that is unreal what you guys do, because there's 6 or 7 people on there just strictly talking about how can we take care of this person. And so we had immediate feedback on his emotional condition, and we were talking about lining up his counseling, which is covered, making sure that he's taken care of. In his case, he couldn't go home. His apartment was a crime scene. And so we had an apartment, we had a hotel room for him. We were there when he got bailed out. He was arrested in the middle of the night, so he came out, in his sleeping clothes.
Yeah.
Like they don't let you go get dressed before they take you to jail. And so they met him outside, took him to the hotel, got some food for him, made arrangements to get him some clothes. I mean, none of this stuff is in our, contract, but it's part of what we do. It's very personal, right? What we do. We didn't send him a list of attorneys. We didn't say, send us the bills and we'll pay for them. Like, we put people on the ground to help this guy out. So it's a very detailed process. It certainly can be expensive, but that's what we're here for. And it's personal, right? You have someone there who looks you in the eye when you come out of jail. In this particular case, I think they said the member just broke down immediately when he saw our people, that he just was sobbing, and it's understandable. He was a guy, was a Army veteran or Marines, I can't forget now. So you think they're pretty tough guys, but if you've never been in jail and you get out, you're in pretty rough shape. And he had to do some very difficult things to defend himself. So I was really proud of what we did there, and knowing that that's what we do every time, is kind of what inspires us to keep that process, to keep the expertise, to keep true to what we do. We never take the cheap way out. A lot of people always ask, how do you pick those attorneys? Do you find a cheap one? Don't we pick the very best attorney for your specific case in your location, regardless of the cost? We don't care. So that's how the process works. No one else will do it. I don't know why no one else will do it, because there's nothing better than taking care of somebody that way.
That's one thing, Chris, when I interviewed Chris Cunningham, who is our one on the critical response team, she was talking about her whole years in law enforcement staying in her lane. And this was the first opportunity she really got to see actually a physical, emotional, mental change in somebody, and how good it felt to be able to do that.
That's one thing the members know, how we take care of them. But if you're on the outside looking in, like I was when I came 2 years ago, sometimes you get caught up in this, well, who's going to pay model, right? Like everybody in the industry pays for the same stuff to some extent. They don't all pay for it, but there's plenty of people who will pay the legal fees, and they have a bail program, but we just do all these other things that nobody else will do. And that's what makes a difference for the members, right? We don't send you a list of attorneys, right? So in our case, the guy's in jail. How's he going to get the list of attorneys? He wasn't married, didn't have any family there in town. Who's going to get the list of attorneys and pick one? They're going to wait till he gets bailed out. Well, who's going to arrange the bail? Who's going to go take the check to the clerk before, the courthouse closes on Friday, where he could have spent the whole weekend in jail? So it's a big, big difference in what we do. And I always try to tell people, all these other companies in our industry, they'll pay. They will pay the bills, but they just don't provide the service that we do. They just don't send people on the ground. They just don't go in there and do all those little things that get somebody that peace after the incident that makes them break down. We had, I remember in LA, John White, he's done a testimonial video for us. And one of the things he said was, the first night after, in that case, it was Gary and Rob who went, the first night after they came, I was just able to sleep that night. Like I just was, I was now at ease knowing that I had these experts in person helping me. And, again, that's why we're here.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, and this, let's talk a little bit about, we do things a lot differently, and it's not, I agree with you, and I've always said, all the companies out there, I have no doubt they're going to do what they say they're going to
Yes.
do. A lot of ours, I think, is based on experience, and not just experience in the legal field, but also in law enforcement side. And that's one of the things. Can you comment just a little bit about how we've always talked about, we're going to err on the side of our members, because not everything that happens is going to be cut and dry. In fact, very few things are going to be cut and dry. And so things have to be looked at, and they have to be looked at by people with experience. And maybe we talk about it all the time because we're part of that experience and we have that history of experience. But you coming in and seeing that, from a different angle.
Yeah, that was really the biggest learning curve for me, was that piece of it, right? What kind of experience, and eyes do we put on a member's situation when they call in? There's a case in the news right now where that person was a member of another organization and they made a call, that was incorrect, right? Because they don't have the law enforcement experience. They don't have that legal experience on staff. And they made a call that was incorrect about the self-defense situation. And, even if they didn't know, they didn't err on the side of the member. And so in our cases, of course, we always do. We have a bias for coverage. We have a bias to help the member. And so when they report it as a self-defense incident, that's the way that we treat it, and we start to work on it immediately. And when you look at yourself, Stan, you guys have decades of law enforcement experience. We have Gary with decades of law enforcement experience, Chris with decades of law enforcement experience. You've got Don West, one of the top criminal defense attorneys, in North America, 40 years now of criminal defense experience. We have Jennifer Chance, who, has been on a recent podcast, right? She was a prosecutor. She understands that side of it. She understands the legislative side, working for the governor. So we have all these folks looking at it who know exactly what we're looking at. And that allows us to make good decisions, quick decisions, continue to move forward on a case rather than be cautious and say, well, we don't really know. Let's wait and see what happens in court. Like, we don't do it like that. We know what's going on. We know how to assess them, and we move forward rapidly on the member's behalf. Yeah.
And that's what we talked about with Jennifer, is applying all those resources we can as soon as we can. Even though, we may not have all the facts and all the evidence in at that point, and that's one thing. If the court allows for a entry of self-defense, then that's it.
It's covered, right?
It's covered.
Admissible evidence of self-defense.
Yeah.
That case I was talking about that's in the news, the court allowed self-defense as his defense, and I believe he was found innocent on that charge. And so I'm sure it's a struggle for people right now to say, well, why would I have a service like this if somebody doesn't cover it?
Yeah.
Of course, we would have covered it. We would be in there the whole way. We would have had boots on the ground the next day. So it makes a difference, the experience we have. And not only can we translate that into speed and effectiveness, but that expertise, goes all the way through the case, right? So we're able to assist if needed by the local attorney. We're able to supplement, investigative resources if we need to. Nobody brings the resources to bear that we do.
Right. So, and I think the biggest difference with our company is our critical response team. And so why don't you talk a little bit about what it takes to be on that? Because we've talked about, the different people that we have, but what does it take to be on that team?
Well, it takes a whole lot of law enforcement experience, and in particular, homicide investigation, dealing, with officer-involved shootings, all the things that go with that, which is not just the investigative side of it, it's the peer support and all the things that, the police model is, and how they care for one of the officers after they've been involved in a shooting. So when you look at, like, Chris Cunningham, who just joined us this year, her total law enforcement experience over 20 years, but she spent 17 years as a homicide investigator. Now we have Gary Eastridge, who has a super long law enforcement career as well. And even Gary said to me, he goes, it's very rare that somebody does 17 years in homicide because it's a difficult grind. But when people meet Chris, she's not like this grizzled homicide investigator. She's a person that cares about people. And so she's able to apply all that experience plus her own personal, caring attitude to the members and really take good care of them. And she knows what's coming next in the process. She knows what the DA is likely to do. She knows what the police are going to do. She knows, how to deal with the bail systems. She understands all of that completely. And of course, she's able to tell that face-to-face to a member when she goes and meets with them in these most difficult circumstances. And sometimes, what the members consistently say is, there's a lot of comfort in just knowing what to expect,
Right.
rather than just being sort of a victim of the system where you just get bounced around and you don't know what's coming. And we're able to prepare them. Stephen Maddox, when I talked to him, he's like, CCW Safe did such a good job helping my family understand what was happening, even when he was in jail, what to expect next. And he said that was just a huge comfort to his wife and kids, knowing how things were going to go down and where we would be in the process, and standing in with him the whole time. So all that experience, you have to have that. We don't hire, people with a few years of law enforcement experience. Typically, they're retired with at least 20 years of experience, and some of that in a pretty serious investigative manner, most likely homicide, right?
Most of the people, I would say almost all of our members who we've been able to assist, they're not familiar. They haven't been through the criminal justice system. That's a huge part of it, is knowing what's coming up and what resources are going to need for what's coming, the timing of it, because a lot of these things are going to go over a year to 2 years in case it's not going to be 6 months you're going to be in trial.
Right.
So,
you hit it all on the head as well, right? Nobody has that experience. That team is the difference. And not only are they just boots on the ground when the case goes down, but they're assigned to you all the way through. Chris Cunningham is your critical response coordinator. So she can be your main point of contact. Of course, they can contact with Don as well, but you're not getting some administrative person like our other competitors might do, where it's like just someone who processes paperwork and, oh, did you get that check? I mean, that's fine. We need to do that stuff. But they're working with the person all the way through, how are you feeling? What's going on? Here's what's coming, right? It's a whole different animal when somebody like that is your point of contact for your case and helping you throughout what could be a 2-year process. I mean, Stephen Maddox's case was 20 months, 22. It was super long, right? And so another huge difference between us and everybody else is you have, that's the person assigned to you, not a secretary, not an accountant, not a accounts payable clerk, not a paperwork person. You have an experienced person by your side.
And peer support's a big deal. And we're starting to hear more about peer support. When I was in law enforcement, peer support really wasn't a term back then. Kind of toward the end of my career, it was middle to end of my career. But you see that a lot in military and law enforcement when they're dealing with their own people. This peer support system that, you have, a lot of people don't realize that you have to stay healthy, not just, mentally, physically, emotionally. You have to stay healthy, because that is going to take over 2 years, up to 2 years to endure what you're going to endure in one of those. It's not a process that, we push the resources and then we're done until the trial. It continues, as we go. So, so following up, anything else you'd like to talk about?
Just say it's been an awesome 2 years. I love it. And it really, I think everybody in our office, whether it's someone answering the phones and helping the members, with their accounts, or me or Chris or anyone else, it's a pleasure to get up in the morning and come to work at a place where you're really helping somebody, right? I mean, yes, it's a job, but it doesn't feel like it. It's like we're coming to work to help people. Everything we do is geared around the members. And I can tell you in the 30 years prior to that wasn't always the case. And so it's good to come in knowing that you have a real purpose that literally changes somebody's life. And so I'm very proud to be a member.
Well, it's been great to have you. I think you've done a phenomenal job
Thank
here.
you.
And, piggybacking on what you just said, it's also, none of these cases are the same. It's always, each case that comes is going to be different. And again, that's another thing that comes into, our core values of leadership and expertise and caring, of having that history of, and some of these cases may be similar in some ways, but they're all going to be different, and they're all going to need really a specialized, case worker, critical responder for each and every one. So that kind of makes it exciting too, when you come to work and you feel like you're making a difference in people's lives. And it's not the same thing every day. I mean,
No.
so different.
No, I've learned a lot about self-defense law, all these things. And I would just say, there's a lot of conversation in the industry right now about different companies. There's a lot of confusion now for people who've been members of other services. And what people with firearms, people that are a protector, that are going to defend themselves and their family, they're just looking for somebody that they can trust. Who's going to be there for me when I need them? And that, again, that's the satisfaction that we get, knowing that that's who we are. We're there when you need somebody, when you need that help, when you've been forced into that situation to defend yourself, right? You didn't choose it. It was thrust upon you. And now you need the help. That's what we're there for. And so when all this confusion is going on and people are trying to figure out who really exists to help the members, who really, hires the right people to make sure that we get help. I mean, think about Chris and Gary, right? They're not deployed on a case every day. We pay them money just to be ready. And so sometimes they get deployed frequently, infrequently, but that's an investment that we make. So we make a lot of investments to make sure that people will have the peace of mind that they're going to get the best possible service when they need it. And that's why we come in every day. And it's a joy and it's fun to know that we're taking care of the members. And so hopefully people who are trying to figure out who to choose and what to do, that they'll choose us. And if you do, I can safely say you'll never regret choosing CCW Safe, because this team is just the best of the best. And we're committed to helping people.
Like, comment, share. If you have any questions, post it below. And if you have any questions for Kent, let us know.
Sure.
And we'll have him on a podcast soon. Y'all take care and see you soon.